Our first speaker is Tom Uram. He's a group leader and computer scientist at Argonne Leadership Computing Facility, and he leads the data services and workflows team. Those who don't know, Argonne Leadership Computing Facility holds Aurora. It hosts Aurora, and it's one of the leadership computing facility available for users. His work spans high-performance computing, cosmology, high-energy physics, brain connectomics. He leads Nexus. This is the sort of the link that links the computing facility with experimental facilities, and is doing a lot of amazing work on that front. Personal note, Tom and I overlapped at Argonne, and I'm very, very glad that he accepted to give this talk, and I hand over to Tom. Tom, please.
Thanks, Prasanna. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Uram from the Argonne Leadership Computing Facility. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to talk to you today about how at ALCF we're thinking about AI for science and thinking about the facility as a collaborator. In a lot of ways, we've been working in this direction for some time. On the next slide. Oh, sorry, I have it myself. Thank you. You see the series of systems that we've had at ALCF over time, culminating in Aurora at our current machine. We've been at this for a long time in terms of pushing the boundaries and building out and operating leadership scale resources for our users. We're a user facility. We're driven by people who come to the lab because they want to do science that can only be done on the scale of machines that we field at the lab. In addition to systems like Aurora, we're also actively developing, deploying systems for AI inference because we recognize that this is an enormous opportunity for the future. And this includes systems like SOFIA, this NVIDIA A100 system, which came out of the Polaris system, which is a larger system, A100 built system. Metis, a Samba Nova system designed for inference. Minerva, an NVIDIA B200 system. And Tara, a GH200 system. The latter two systems are will go into production soon, but having dedicated systems for inference is one of the key factors that we're after here. On top of that hardware layer, we're building a software layer. And so we operate an inference service, which currently is backed by the SOFIA A100 system and the Samba Nova Metis system. This inference service, we make available open weight models, right? Everyone talks about the frontier models and believes that they need the frontier models for their science. In many cases, that's increasingly not true. There's been a lot of discussion this week about smaller models that are sufficient for various problems, smaller models that are faster for the tasks that you're after, maybe that can run even on the same machine that you're using for your simulations. So there's a distribution here that we can exploit. And in this case, we're making available 35 plus models. The number continues to grow. These are open weight LLMs. They're embedding models. They're domain-specific science models. And the community, we think, needs this capability. One of the other themes that has come up this week is the cost of using commercial frontier models. And in this case, with this service, we're backing this by our own resources. And so it's owned within the facility. We use a standard API, so we can integrate this with agent harnesses like OpenCode or Claude Code. The authentication is very, very easy for us to manage. We can get people on the same way that we get them on our other systems like Aurora. And for this service, we have a couple of different approaches. So one is that we maintain some models that we know are in demand We keep them in memory on the system so that they're very responsive when requests come in. And then other systems that are loaded other models are loaded on demand. So if you request a model that's not hot on the system, we will load it. And then it allows us to balance across this range of models and the varying demand over time. Service has been in production since July of 2024. There's been over 450 users. I'm sure it's increased since then. So I mentioned the hardware, and I mentioned the software, which is the inference service. And I'll mention one other thing, which is how do agents get access to the systems? We have a variety of different systems at ALCF, and some of them are better for some tasks than they are for other tasks. And so we think about how do we bring them together. One of them is having a job submission API to the various systems. You have an agent that lives on your laptop or elsewhere so that it can orchestrate tasks running across different systems. This enables remote computing, supports time-sensitive analysis for experiments. This is more traditional, but also enables agents to have access to these systems. Another way that we do that support that same approach to job submission is through Globus Compute. This gives us very much the same approach where you can programmatically submit jobs to the different systems, but also brings some additional advantages. Those things all together, I would say, the hardware, the inference service, and the ability to submit jobs is basically laying the foundation for AI-driven workflows. So what does that mean? It means several capabilities. One thing I didn't mention was the ability to run agent frameworks in a scalable manner. This means, of course, we want to be able to scale LLMs across machines like Aurora, but in addition to that, we need this orchestration piece. And so that brings in having the things I just described. Easy access to these resources, access to LLMs, access to job submission in multiple systems. And based on that, then I'll walk through some examples that range from more basic automation level things that we have done in the past up to current agent workflows and things that run specifically on individual systems. Once we had the ability to have remote job submission, we could support use cases like this one from the advanced photon source, light source at Argonne, where during experiments, they're taking data. They want to be able to take, as soon as a data set arrives, transfer that data to the computing facility, run analyses on it, and get the results back to the beamline during the experiment time. I've been at the lab long enough that I worked with people who, when they did their experiments, they took all their data, wrote it on hard drives, packed a box of hard drives in their car, and drove back to their home institution to analyze the data, see what they actually took. Now they're doing it at the beamline. No surprise, it's been a long time, but this is routine now, as it should be. Now they've moved beyond that, and so now we have not just the advanced photon source, but multiple light sources using this same approach to now use AI-based methods for segmentation of their data. They do tomography, they take tomography data, reconstruct it, do segmentation of it, and then have that result back at their beamline during the time of the experiment. This is a similar example from a fusion facility on the West Coast in California in the US. During their experiments, they have a 20-minute experiment cycle where they need to analyze that data in between cycles during experiments. And they do this by using ALCF and NERSC for different capabilities, using the same approach as the APS example. This is, again, during this experiment time automation. Now they're looking at other approaches where they can take all of their experiment data database and link that with the LLM inference, the inference service that we have at ALCF, to query their database and have plots. Their trajectory is to move beyond this sort of LLM-based analysis of historical data into an ability to work with digital twins that are running at the same time on our computing systems, and having that also be LLM-driven. Another example I'll give is from the cosmology group at Argonne. In this case, they've worked on a project called OpenCosmo. The cosmology simulations that this team runs have aggregated petabytes of data over the years. And the problem that they have is that their community can't actually move that data to analyze it. So what they did first was to enable subsampling of the data so that communities could get manageable subsets and move them to their home institutions for analysis. Even that was not ideal. So they moved to doing in-place simulation on the data at ALCF, and so that's what they're doing now. Teams can come in, they find the simulation that they care about, they analyze the particle data or the dark matter halo data, and they can run specific analyses on that data through an interface that gives them flexible access. Or if they actually are users of ALCF, then they can take that data and run their own analyses on it instead of just the canned analyses that are provided through this OpenCosmo interface. One point there is that OpenCosmo is now given this ability where you have an interface to large data sets and analyses similar to the Fusion example. They can integrate a plain language interface for analyzing that data and providing that back to users, again, driven by the ALCF inference service. Another example is the struct bioreasoner is this one. So in this case, what they're looking at is intrinsically disordered proteins. It's a drug discovery workflow. And they're bringing together the ability to look at results from the literature. So they trained RAG on the literature. And then they can also do plain language objectives that they give to the system. And the reasoning agent plans out how to approach this problem, interacts with the system, and runs simulations. And in this closed loop, can explore the results of the simulation and how they factor into the objective, and continue to produce simulations that should be run until the result is achieved. In this case, you take this problem of intrinsically disordered proteins that are considered sort of undruggable. It's really hard to find drugs that apply for binding to these targets. And they were able to, one, test a lot of targets, but also by doing this and having it be AI-driven, they were able to arrive at targets that outperformed what the targets that humans were able to predict. So not only do you get a much larger space explored, you get it explored intelligently and produce more results that are actionable. This work used also Academy, which is a framework for describing agents and managing agents. We see this in a lot of places now, but Academy was an early effort here and produced results here in the struct bioreasoner example. Another similar example is ChemGraph. So you can see here this, we have, again, a plain language interface to a planner agent. The planner agent constructs objectives and simulations that should be run. There's a series of executor agents. In this case, the collection of nodes is allocated and simulations are run, and these are maybe faster running simulations. And so it's essentially a reservoir for jobs. Once these nodes are allocated, They can be used over and over throughout the period of this reasoning objective, this reasoning loop, and it can grow elastically. So if there's a promising direction that's taken, more nodes can be allocated into the pool and used for simulations throughout the time. And again, there's an analyst agent that evaluates results and decides whether to generate more tasks and inject them into the pool that's managed by Parcel until it reaches the end of the objective, and then all those nodes spin down. So this is, again, a case of everything running on the system, but it having embedded reasoning agents. So I wanted to talk about this range of different examples that are built on, again, the idea of having dedicated hardware for inference and a dedicated inference service and services that then support that. In some cases, remote simulation, submission of jobs, and in some cases, things running directly on the systems. There was a call out in this session specifically for the Genesis mission, so I did want to address just a couple parts of that. So I'm involved in the American Science Cloud effort. I was today in a BOF on similar efforts in Euro HPC, so I just wanted to mention this. I described work that's being done at ALCF in terms of AI-driven workflows. And in the American Science Cloud, I'm leading the AI portion of this effort, which brings together not just efforts at Argonne, but efforts across the DOE labs, where we will, the goal is to then approach the sorts of examples that I described, not just at Argonne, but at the other labs with some centralized interface that gives us things like an ability to share models, to have a central repository for training models, have access to the sorts of open weight LLMs that I described we have at ALCF, but also frontier LLMs that will come from the commercial vendors, and other cloud-like capabilities that would be useful for things like, imagine long-running agents sitting on cloud infrastructure and accessing the computing that exists at any of the labs. So that's the American Science Cloud is one part of that. And another part of it is ModCon. This is the Transformational AI Models Consortium, ModCon for short. You should take the American Science Cloud effort as an attempt to build infrastructure to support all of this work, and ModCon as really the very specific AI part of the work that is foundational model development, but then also interfacing with specific teams to help them understand how to build out models specifically based on their problems and their data and their objectives. You see the mission listed there. There's 4 core teams in ModCon, the partnerships and IP management for figuring out how we interface with partners within and outside the labs. Data brokers and standards. There's clear relationship between the data efforts within ModCon and data efforts in the American Science Cloud. Best practices for scientific workflows is really looking at a lot of the sorts of things that I described in the examples, but again, very much from the AI standpoint. And then the base is this cross-cutting AI capabilities, which is should be common to all of the teams, at least to some degree. There's significant crossover between these two efforts, American Science Cloud and ModCon, and they both live under this Genesis mission umbrella. We did recently have, we do currently have an open call for the Genesis mission project, and so very soon there will be announcements about teams that will go forward in that context. I think that's really where we'll start to see these things come together in terms of integration with science teams. That's all I have. Maybe there are some questions. I have a few minutes. Yes?
Marek from Cambridge. Apart from being a scientist in HPS, I'm kind of an open source person, so I tend to be quite wary about vendor lock-in of any sort. And as it happens, there was an article on the Register, I think yesterday, talking about how a lot of people have not realized that those commercial LLMs in fact do introduce quite large amounts of lock-in that people don't realize. They end up being quite embedded into your systems, and it's very difficult to get out of it. So what, if any, precautions are being taken in this project to ensure that there will be possible, once we have developed better academic models, we will be able to actually move away from the commercial ones, or possibly if somebody wants to switch to a commercial one for some purpose, we will have this interoperability.
It's a very good question. I was in, again, in the Euro HPC meeting this afternoon, and a question came up about provenance, right? And so we always talk about provenance in terms of code and maybe even the impact of particular systems on the results that you have, underlying libraries. If we think about it from the standpoint of models, we clearly, one, we want to retain that control. We don't have that control with frontier models at all. This is typical analog to a closed source dependency. Another one is the stochastic nature of models anyway, right? So how much provenance can you achieve? But maybe the best case that we can get is using models that are at least within our control, right? And then at least using the same model, you have a chance of having a similar result. It wouldn't be reproducible at all, right? But I think the trend there is to say once you've gotten something useful out of a model, you try to figure out how to make that result, how to retain that result as an artifact, right? So it might be that you don't rely on the model anymore. You try to encode that's deterministic, the result that you got from the model, and preserve that as part of your provenance. Did that answer your question?
Well, part of it, because at this point it's still not quite sure if because I saw Claude mentioned on some of your slides. So what if at some point you decided that you wanted to switch from Claude to something written by whatever, your HPC or Swiss AI or however experts, and then you find out that Claude is so embedded into your frameworks that it would take several people weeks to disentangle that?
I think it's a very good question. Yes, I left that part unanswered, but I go back to it because I think this is probably true for many of us. You work with people who are making a lot of progress using Claude Code as the center of what they're doing. And it's an enviable amount of progress that they're making, but you recognize that they have that troubling dependency, right? And you have other people who are using other harnesses like OpenCode or Hermes, and you recognize that they may be they should be achieving at the same rate, right? They should be achieving at the same rate, but there may be some overhead. And the cost of the overhead, the benefit of the overhead is that you have a better chance at reproducibility, right? You own much more of the process. We'll do our best to preserve, reproducibility. I think we've made questionable progress on reproducibility even before AI. So we'll do what we can as a community.
We have a few more minutes. If you have questions, please come here, ask questions directly, or you can put that in the chat. Meanwhile, Tom, so one question, so this is related to the reproducibility. the very nature of agentic system is dynamic workflows, right? So previously, as a scientist, you write deterministic workflows that you exactly know when to move data, where the execution will be. But now this is completely, not completely, but this is undergoing a change, right? So your workflow itself is dynamic. So what are the implications of it? Means the implications with respect to reproducibility, or even like how can I execute across different resources, right? So my experiment can run at any time. I can take the data and then I can run simulation at any point of time. Then I need to talk to the scheduler to make sure that I have the resources, but the scheduler itself can be dynamic. So this is opening up a new paradigm, I would say. How are you dealing with all these dynamic workflow? Because these systems are designed for deterministic workflow, right? So,
right, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that we will have an answer soon for that, but the way that I am interpreting your question is just at the same time that we have this dynamism coming into it, that will imply a sense of scale, right? So we've all worked with teams that operated at or near the scale of the machines that we were operating on, right? This is why we build these machines. This is for people who need the whole machine or half of the machine, because their problems are that large and complex. We'd like our whole community to be that way. A fraction of the community is that way. In the future, when it's all AI-driven and you have this dynamism, and not only do you have unpredictable growth in the size of the jobs that are being run, but you have many, many more people who are equipped with that capability, I think it will just become a matter of feeling like we have even less compute than we've had in the past, right? We'll be more oversubscribed than we have ever been. In terms of the dynamic nature, one thing that I mentioned was the ability to grow your jobs elastically, and we definitely see this. You and I saw this years ago in hyperparameter optimization. You have some irregular workload, and it can grow and shrink over time. That doesn't fit into a regular batch system, right? I mean, you have to have some other framework for accommodating that. And we've worked for a long time on those cases because we had specific use cases for that problem. Now, AI is a very specific use case for that problem, agentic workflows.
Right. Right, I think we are done. Thank you, Tom. Another round of applause for Tom. Great.
Thank you.